Welcome. This is our first lesson on the Bible study in the book of Ruth. I'm Brian Musser, the Baptist campus minister at Drexel, and I'm so glad you've decided to join us for this video. As you may have seen in the introduction, we're going to be studying the book of Ruth, but in a way that helps us learn how to study the scripture as a whole. So we're not just going to be looking at Ruth, but we're going to be analyzing the way to look at a Bible story like Ruth. So Ruth, learning how to study the Bible. Just an interesting quote. One of the reasons why we are looking at Ruth, and there's several of it, is just the beauty that is Ruth. Coming out of one of the commentaries, the book of Ruth is one of the most delightful literary compositions of the ancient world. That quote goes on to say, the narrator is a master of painting word pictures. He skillfully employs the techniques of dialogue, characterization, repetition, reticence, ambiguity, suspense, wordplays, inclusios, etc., to produce this moving work of art. But what is it about this picture that moves the reader, and what are the points he seeks to get across? Although Ruth is a short book, it is complex in its plot and subtle in its development of themes, of which there are several. Thinking about this, we chose Ruth, and we chose to study Ruth because one, it's a short book. It's only 4 chapters. You can probably read it in about 15 minutes. But two, it's also a book that you can easily get kind of the general idea of what's going on by just a simple read. You'll know who the characters are and you'll know the basic plot structure. But it also has so many details that are contextual to the actual time and place, the setting, and the people that's the story of Ruth is centered around, that studying it will unearth so much more of a picture of what is going on than just a simple read. And then the final reason why we were kind of looking at it is what this commentator is saying is it's a good piece of literature. It has a lot going on that as we unpack it and as we study it and as we dive into the book, we will see how awesome this story actually is. So this video is just going to be some very basic information on the book. First, we're going to talk about the author, and we're not going to say a whole much. The author is anonymous and is unknown. And you might think that statement is a little bit redundant, but the idea of anonymous means that the book itself, that the text and the context itself, nowhere in the book of Ruth is the author credited. There is no statement saying I wrote this, or this was written by so that's what anonymous means. Now, unknown also means something slightly different. It's that throughout the tradition of this text, the authorship has not been assigned to anyone that we know of. Let me compare it to, say, the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke is technically also anonymous. Nowhere in the book of Luke does it say, I, Luke, am writing this, which is interesting because it's clearly says who he's writing it to, but it never says who's writing it. However, through church tradition, there is a strong tradition that assigns the authorship to Luke, of the Gospel of Luke, to the person of Luke. So we see a difference there where Luke is anonymous, but the author is known. Whereas here, the author is anonymous and unknown. Even like Paul's letters, Paul always says, I, Paul, write this, just about every time. So we have there where the author is stated and the author is known. So, but here, the book of Ruth, we don't know either. Nothing in the text claims to authorship, and the tradition really doesn't have one. There is a little bit of a tradition that Samuel wrote it. However, we doubt that, mainly because how the book of Ruth treats the time of the judges as history, as distant history, and we'll see that. And for Samuel, who lived in the time of the judges, or at the very end of the time of judges, it wouldn't have been so historical. Also, it treats some customs that happened during the time of judges as distant history too, that the author chooses to explain to us. And that doesn't seem to fall into Samuel's life as well. Third reason we doubt Samuel wrote it is how important David, with the last word of the text being David, and how important the lineage of David shows up in the book of Ruth. And the fact that Samuel died before he was anointed by Samuel to be king, but he never took the throne. So that makes this a little bit, Samuel could have wrote it. There are ways that we could say Samuel wrote it, but we doubt that. And that is the only person named in history associated with the book of Ruth at all. And so we'll just leave the authorship as anonymous and unknown. Next, date is also unknown. We can narrow it down between after the time of Judges because it treats the Judges as historical context. The times of the Judges have happened, and here's a story that comes out of them. And it's probably before the exile, probably before 586 when the Babylonians come and conquer Jerusalem and exile the Jews into Babylon. We're not completely sure of that. There are some cases made that it is post even after that. I would also say it's written in a time when the judges were history and the Davidic dynasty, King David and his heirs sitting on the throne of Jerusalem are important. This story is attached to that dynasty in a way that makes us assume that whoever's reading it and whoever's writing it hold that dynasty in some sort of importance. So it's a big window. It's probably about 400 or 500 year window that this could have been written in. But that's kind of when it was written. That's as narrow of a window as we can get down. Some commentators try to say, you know what, it might be best that the reign of Solomon or the reign of Hezekiah or the reign of Josiah, these good kings in Judah's history, where because of how the Davidic monarchy is spotlighted in this story, it may have been written when the Davidic monarchy was doing well, was being godly, was being upright. So those kings come to the foreground, but really we can't that's that makes sense, but there is no determinative factor in that as well. Next, the audience. This was written to at least Israelites, definitely Jews. Um, this was written to show them how to live a godly life in times such as these, in a time like the Judges, how to live according to the book of the law, how to live according to the ways of Yahweh, and sometime between the Judges and the exile, how to live an upright life. It could have been written to the northern tribe or the southern tribe, but it was also written to Israelites, probably Israelites of the tribe of Judah, to highlight the Davidic monarchy again. That features so prominently in what we're the text. Finally, the genre, and this is the most interesting thing. It's a historically based short story. Um, all those kind of words are important. Um, the text itself takes an incredible amount of care to set this in a specific historical context, connecting it to real historical people, setting up real cultural events and social ideas, putting everything around this to make it certain that it was at this point in history relating to these people in history. Now, I say that not to say that if it didn't have these, it wouldn't be a true story. It it's that these things make it it intends to be historical. For example, it's not a once upon a time story where it could happen at any age and timeless. This takes care to show us when it happened, who it happened, where it happened. This is a historical based story. Now, the reason why it's called short story, and this is a literary term which I was learning about. Short stories don't change your characters. There's really very little of a character arc in a short story. Short stories reveal the characters. The characters are basically introduced to you, and the story tells you who they are and how they relate to each other. Now, this is kind of interesting with Ruth because Naomi does change a little bit, and you could call the Book of Ruth based on Naomi's character, maybe a tale or maybe a novella, because Naomi in the Book of Ruth does develop some. There is a change in her character. However, all the other characters, Ruth, Boaz, the other two main characters, are introduced to us in a certain way, and the story just reveals more of that central character. This is the book of the Bible that has the most dialogue in it. There are some stats here that are just kind of interesting. 55 of the 85 verses in the book of Ruth are dialogue or someone speaking to someone else. And 678 of the 1,294 words are wrapped up in dialogue. No other book of the Bible has that much dialogue in it. So paying attention to who says what and what is being said and who are they talking to, this this book is all about people talking to each other and what they say. Now, that's our brief introduction. As always, I want you to know there are two ways you can join. You can join live Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via Zoom. Contact me in one of the many ways below to find that, or you can continue to watch these weekly wrap-ups, which this is the first video of the first week for do that on YouTube or on my WordPress blog site. And if you want to, you can follow us on all sorts of social media. There's Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. All those things will be down at the bottom. To find it, links in the description. If you like this video, let us know. Subscribe, like. If you really like this video, share it with your friends.